Hello and welcome to another edition of the Time for Impact podcast with myself, Chris Wade, and my co-host, Matt Cobble. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Hi, Chris. Hope you're doing okay today.
Yeah, good. I should say to anybody listening who won't know because they're not listening to this live that we're recording on a sunny August morning at 7:00 in the morning, and I'll explain why in a moment why we're doing this so early in the day. But as always, we've got a special guest on the podcast today who's joining us from an organisation that's Matt and I are big fans of, to be honest with you, and who are an organisation who are incredibly innovative and, in our views, shaking up the way volunteering is thought of across the sector, which is why our guest is here today. So we have Carol Cunningham, who's the global lead of volunteering for Parkrun, an organisation that I'm sure lots of our listeners are involved in as runners and quite likely as volunteers as well. So we're really delighted to have you here today, Carol, and to hear more about the Parkrun model and what the rest of the sector perhaps could learn from your examples. So hi, nice to see you.
I should say g'day, shouldn't I? I'm coming to you from Sydney in Australia. I would love to say I'm coming from a really sunny and hot Sydney, but it's the middle of winter here and I'm looking out the window and it is raining. So, probably, but even though it's 7 a.m. your time, I bet it's hotter than it is here. But thank you for having me.
Feeling quite smug here, actually, Carol, yeah. So it's lovely weather here. So, why don't you start by telling us how you got involved in Parkrun?
Yeah, definitely. Would it be useful if I gave you a bit of an overview of what Parkrun is? And so Parkrun, we're a global charity, and it's all about bringing communities together to be active, to be social, to get outside. And we have been around since 2004, so this is our 20th year. We're still quite young, actually. 20 years old. So what we have, for people who don't know, we have 5K and 2K events on a weekend. Saturday is for everyone, Sunday a junior event, and you can come along to Parkrun. They're completely free. Got about 2,500 events across the world. It's 22 countries I think we're in now, and you can walk it, you can run it, you can spectate, you can come for coffee. Our vision is healthy and happiness. Everyone who comes on, that's our goal. And that's, I guess, for me, my journey with Parkrun. I got involved when I was back visiting my family in the UK. So I'd emigrated to Australia, but came back for an extended period of time. My family live in Hull, and I think I was back for like 6 weeks or something like this. And probably by that time, I was kind of wanting to do something outside of my family and do something on my own. And I was flicking through, it might have been Runner's World. I can't remember what it was, but I was looking through the back of Runner's World, and they have all these events that they have on. There's listing there, one close to me. It's a Parkrun community event, open to anybody, Saturday morning, 8:00. It's free. And I didn't get much further than the free because I'm a bit of a penny pincher. I was like, right, I'm going to go along and see what this is about. Didn't have high expectations. I guess right from the start, I genuinely was blown away. Like, I hadn't experienced anything like it. I've been to running clubs before, which were fabulous, but this, you had everybody there. You had, kids, you had older people, you had people sitting down having a coffee, people walking, running. Like, it didn't matter what you were wearing, what your speed was, or anything like this. You were all welcome. So I had a great time. Really, it was like meeting the people. That was the thing for me. We went for coffee afterwards. And then I went home and I was like, right, this is great. I'll come back again in a couple of weeks before I leave for Australia, just to confirm like this was as good as I thought. And then, basically went again, second time, enjoyed it, loved it. Came back to Australia. I was like Googling or Yahooing, whatever it was at the time. and there wasn't really parkrun there. It was only just starting, and the guy who was organising, Tim, said, "Look, if you're interested in getting involved in parkrun, you can set one up where you live." So I was living in Melbourne at the time, and got involved in setting up the third parkrun event in Australia. And that's when it really changed for me with parkrun, because from that kind of point onwards, it was volunteering that I was involved with. And I loved it. I loved everything about organising, meeting people. I did it for about a year and a half. In fact, I only volunteered for that first year and a half. I never walked or ran the course. It was just volunteering. And then I guess my journey, I moved to Singapore with my day job, and I said I'll only move if I can look to set up Singapore Parkrun. And yeah, that happened as well. So I managed to be involved in that. But then when I moved back to Australia, an opportunity came up in the APAC office, head office at Parkrun. So I applied, and kind of the rest is history with that. I've been working for Parkrun now for about 7 years, all in the volunteering space, and feel extremely privileged to be involved in the community and supporting amazing volunteers. And that's what I do now. So strategy projects. I'm in a really exciting phase for Parkrun now. We're in our new strategy, global strategy. And yeah, really excited to see what's going to be happening over the next few years.
Brilliant. And for those listening who may know a little less about Parkrun, might be useful perhaps if you could sort of give us in a nutshell the volunteering sort of setup, how volunteering happens at Parkrun
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
different tiers.
definitely. Yeah, so I think most people will be familiar with events on a weekend. That's what most people will see parkrun and experience. And from a volunteering perspective, it's really easy and really straightforward, simple. It's kind of dip your toe in and no commitment. So we have various different roles at events on a weekend that you can come along and get involved with. So, timekeeper, marshal, they're all really, really simple. We have them on our website. We keep it straightforward. You don't need any prior experience, training. You don't even have to have been to parkrun before. And they're supported by event directors. So they're kind of the leaders within the community for each of those events and help run. Those are amazing people who kind of keep it running each week. And then we have kind of a layer of support around the events. So we have what we call ambassadors, who are experienced volunteers. They may have been involved at an event level, who want to get more involved and share their experiences. Or you might have a special skill. You might love photography and want to be one of our photography ambassadors. But it's really that volunteering on a weekend that most people will be familiar with.
Thanks, Carol. I think that sounds like a kind of really interesting but also quite efficient model, if that makes sense. It sounds to me that particularly when you're talking about a sort of global scale, from my understanding, Parkrun's got a very small staff team, so all of this activity leans a lot on volunteers taking part in their local community, volunteers kind of to some extent leading other volunteers. What do you think sort of, I guess, let's say more traditional volunteering organizations could learn from that parkrun model about efficiency or about designing something that operates on a global scale like that? How could we think differently about our volunteering based on what works for parkrun?
Yeah. I'm just wondering whether it might be interesting and useful just to go back a little bit about our evolution, because that will explain kind of where our model is right now. So right from the start, we've always had volunteers at Parkrun. So like day one, our founder, Paul, he was actually a volunteer on day one. So volunteering's always been part of what we do at Parkrun. What's changed is the way that we think about it. And that kind of answers your question, Matt, when I get to that about kind of how it's structured right now and how we get those efficiencies. So at the start, kind of our thinking about events was, how do we run events as efficiently as possible? And our thinking at that time was, let's keep the volunteer numbers as small as possible, keep it as lean as possible, and that will make it easier for events to recruit and populate the positions on the roster. And that was really our thinking. It was all about keeping events as efficient as possible. And our thinking was, if everyone who came along to Parkrun could kind of do the bit, get involved a certain number of times, then it would be really easy to operate events. And what that led to is almost people feeling that they were obliged to volunteer. They had to volunteer, and that's not a good thing. We want people to be doing it because they want to, not because they feel they have to. We kind of fallen into this trap, I think, as an organisation, of viewing volunteering as a sacrifice, like this obligation, and that then led to almost resentment in the community for people who weren't volunteering. So all of this, it kind of, at the start, our view of volunteering, rather than being an unrewarding chore, that's kind of what it was painted like. What we weren't realising was all the benefits that volunteering was providing as an experience in our communities. So that's kind of where we started. Fast forward to where we are now and our model of volunteering. It's completely changed. Like, how we view volunteering and how we set up the structure has changed from where we first started. And a lot of that is due to all the insight and research that we've done over the years. We've done, when was it? 2019, we did a survey. It was a health and wellbeing survey. And that survey told us that, if you come on to Parkrun, you're going to get healthy and happy. We already knew that. That wasn't a surprise. Kind of what the surprise for us was that if you come along and you volunteer, that's where all the health and wellbeing benefits are. So where this led to in terms of our thinking about volunteering, rather than reducing volunteer numbers to the smallest number possible. So sometimes I hear, for other, volunteering, we're going to replace volunteers with, I don't know, timing mats, or, replace volunteers with something more efficient. We flipped that and we said, you know what, we know that volunteering is hugely beneficial for people's health and happiness. It provides huge benefits in our community. So what we've changed with our model is now we're creating more opportunities. We're making it really simple and easy for people to get involved. So if you come along on a Saturday morning to Parkrun, I said earlier, you don't need any qualifications. You don't even need to have been to Parkrun before. No skills, you can rock up, and we've designed it specifically so you can do that. We've also create more opportunities. So somebody comes along and they would like to volunteer and all the roles on the roster are populated, well, we'll create more opportunity because they're so simple and easy to do. And then the benefit of that also for our event directors and ambassadors who are supporting, that it's a really simple, scalable model that we can replicate. And it's if you go to this Parkrun and you're an event director, well, it's pretty much the same as going to another event and being an event director. Obviously, we want communities to be communities, so everyone will have its own flavour and feel for where it is. But that model is essentially the same in each community, but we've adapted it over the years because we want more people to get involved and more people to experience the benefits of volunteering.
Yeah, I'm as well as being a bit of a volunteering geek, I'm also a bit of an organisational design geek. So I'm always really fascinated by that anyway. I mean, in fact, that was my original thing, was organisational design, probably before I got into volunteering. And I've worked with a lot of organisations, fantastic organisations, who deliver brilliant services with and through volunteers, but that have an enormous bureaucracy sitting behind it in terms of, certain numbers of volunteers to certain numbers of volunteer managers, volunteer managers having, massive rule books of how things are done and who does what, and massive training courses and so on. And volunteer roles being quite complicated and all challenging. And I'm always an admirer of Parkrun in that you've managed to put together a cohort of volunteers who on one hand are really empowered. There's standard sort of operating procedures, if you like, for how you do these things, how you marshal or how you timekeep. But yet, people have got quite a lot of autonomy on the day on how they do things. And yet there's not all equally, there's not this great, huge number of expensive staff involved in running the model. It seems to run really clearly, really empowers people, gives people real clarity about the roles they're doing, and breaks them down into really small tasks. For me, there's that lovely, and I often talk about sort of ladders of participation that people hear me talk about a lot. There is that ladder. There's lots of different ways you can get involved. I'd be interested to your views on how that works and what the rest of the sort of volunteering world can learn from your models.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of where we have designed this to be simple and straightforward has become because we've done research into barriers around volunteering, and we've heard about what are the challenges for people. People are short on time. People are busy elsewhere in life. They don't have hours to commit often. Got families, got day jobs. Parkrun as well. A lot of people do. They want to walk and run. Okay, so all of these things. So when we are looking at volunteering, we need to take that into account, like making it so it isn't a big commitment, making it so it's something that is fun, that is something that you can connect. And I think that's really important with Parkrun. One of the biggest things for us is all about human connection. Okay. Reduce the number of volunteers and take away. You're removing that opportunity to build connections with people in your community, meet people, feel that social connection, get outdoors. But yeah, back to kind of the model, we want to make it as straightforward and as simple as possible. So, there are rules, of course there are. We want it to be safe, but we keep those to a minimum where we can and listen to volunteers. And more and more, it's all about as well ensuring that volunteers, we kind of hear their voices, hear what works for them and what not. And we'll always try to make the processes and procedures and whatever rules we have in place work around that model to keep it simple. We don't have a huge rule books. We've got role profiles. That's important. People need to know what they're doing. But again, it's all about ensuring that this is something that is rewarding, got purpose, is fun, but fits into people's lives and they can make it what they want.
It's interesting you say about the communications as well, Carol, because that must be quite challenging. The bigger Parkrun gets, it's easy to communicate to volunteers and to park runners and walkers, but actually getting communication back the other way must become increasingly challenging at the same time that you're trying to build and successfully are building kind of communities locally. And I imagine, well, I know from my own experience that works really well. You build a real community of local people, but building a global community is another level altogether. I mean, I just wonder how both that communication challenge is sort of overcome and whether you even want to, how much you even want to build a sort of global community or whether you're happy with lots of little local communities loosely affiliated.
Yeah. Look, it's definitely as we grow, keeping that connection at kind of all layers of that volunteer community is really important. And it's something that, if there were not necessarily a challenge, but it's something that we've always got in mind that as we scale and grow, how do we keep connected to those events at the community level with a head office that, there may feel like there's layers in between. Obviously, it's not going to be like day one where, Paul, our founder, was, sitting down for coffee with all the volunteers. We've got to be realistic with this. But we are, even over the last year or so, we've started to introduce news groups where we can communicate with our ambassadors and kind of cascade the information down there. We have that ambassador network, which is essentially an opportunity for more localized support. So although it's not your head office directly at an event, you've got somebody there who is getting the communications, is hearing everything, and is able to support events there. So yeah, we obviously want more people to get involved in volunteering, and that will help us, I think, with the ability to support and communicate at all levels.
Thanks, Carol. I think it seems like one of the things that keeps people coming back, or one of the key selling points of volunteering at Parkrun, is the benefits of volunteering, as it were. And that's something we've often talked about on this podcast before. I wonder if you would be able to talk to us about some of the things you found out about the benefits of parkrun volunteers. And I guess what I'm also interested in is how you've sort of leveraged that as part of your volunteering offer. And yeah, I'd just be interested in the journey you've gone on with that and how you bring all of that together.
Yeah. So I mean that's why we have volunteer. I'll just say again, it's the reason we have volunteering at Parkrun is because it is fundamentally contributes to who we are at Parkrun, our vision, healthy and happier. So just like walking and running, coming along volunteering is a form of getting involved in your local community. So that kind of is really important to kind of position volunteering. I'm totally biased with this. Of course, you've got me because I'm volunteering. Our insider said, volunteering. If you walk and run in addition to volunteering, that's where you're going to get the full benefit. And what are those benefits? Well, sense of community, sense of purpose in your community. I think it's something that more than your kind of day-to-day life, you're able to get involved in a local event, in a local community, and contribute to an event in your community. And whether you walk and run and you want to contribute, that's great. Or just come along and be involved in something that's making a difference in your community. And that is really, really important. And we see that all the time when we do our surveys, that that's something that people are really proud of, that they get involved with. There's a whole opportunity, and I can speak for myself with this, that kind of refining of kind of life skills. So, when I got involved initially at Park when I was volunteering, I got the opportunity to organise an event that I'd never done before. That organisation skills, the kind of time management, ability to communicate, all of those, building confidence. And these are really important skills that you might not get opportunity to do elsewhere in life. The empathy and opportunity to mix with people, it's a real leveler. That's how I see Parkrun. You go to Parkrun and you're all on the same level. Like this person next to you, their background, their job or whatever, but it doesn't matter. And you get to speak to people and meet people who, again, you just might not get the opportunity to elsewhere in life. And I think that's great. And I've met people from all walks of different life, all different ages, like kids and older people. Like, and look, there's a photo we've got in Australia, a video of two timekeepers, Isabel, who's 11, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman, but alongside a gentleman who was, retired. And they're just chatting along, friends, and that's great. Like, where else do you get that in life? So that kind of opportunity to see different perspectives. The other thing, actually, with volunteering at Parkrun, I think is really important. Obviously, there's the mental health side of it and getting out in the fresh air, but there's also physical benefits. And this one I find, like, this is one that we really want to start to promote more and more, that everyone knows, you're walking and you're running, but volunteering, there's huge amounts of physical benefits that you can get, like not in the conventional sense of steps and calories, but if you come along to Parker and you're reaching over here doing this, you're walking over to your martial spot over here, like there is movement involved in here. And I think that's really important, when we've got a lot of sedentary aspects of our life. Volunteering's in itself is great physical activity, and also, it's a gateway to other areas. And yeah, look, I think it's overall it's a great way to improve your life. Yeah.
I just really love that notion that, like, to sort of get the full experience of an organization called Parkrun, that volunteering is part of it. I think that's really interesting and it's really important in terms of what you've done. And I mean, as a regular part runner, I see this. I see that week in, week out of people coming back to volunteer because they get something out of it meaningful for them. And I think what it seems you've also invested in a bit more in recent years, I suppose, the milestones for volunteers and things like that, like how volunteers really feel part of that offer in the way that someone who's running can feel part of that offer as well. It'd be interesting for you to explain some of the things you've done in recent years. I guess in a more traditional volunteering setting, we'd call that kind of probably things like reward and recognition. But I think it hits a bit differently in Parkrun when you start to talk about that as part of the offer, as part of the product or the experience that is Parkrun.
It goes back to what I said earlier, that whether you walk, you run, or you volunteer, you are a park runner. Like that's fundamental to what we do. We don't differentiate. And that milestone that you mentioned, Matt, that's exactly the same for. I mean, we have walk run milestones, we have volunteer milestones, but they work exactly the same with this. It's being about part of your community. It's recognizing your commitment to coming down on a regular basis, whether it's any of those ways to get involved. And that's really important. I think also as well, what it does for volunteer, which often can be seen, I think, on the sidelines, a little bit something, again, like I said, that language I used earlier about, you have to kind of give back and do it. It's not like that at Parkrun. It's actually part of the experience for you to come along, and a really valuable one. So yeah, that's something we want to weave more and more into what we do, and encourage more people to give it a try. Come along. We invite you. Dip your toe in. We have created roles where you can walk, run, and volunteer, which I think is brilliant. Yeah, you can. If you're walking and running, and you love it, you can try volunteering and vice versa, which is great.
I wonder also with those milestones, as beyond being sort of reward and recognition, that there's something about a sort of belonging and an affinity to a club.
What I think is really interesting there, though, is you've kind of, whether deliberately or not, I think, with probably just as an explainer for people that are listening, one of the things that happens in Parkrun is that when you have done a certain amount of runs, I'll start off with runs. When you've done a certain amount of runs, you can get a T-shirt with the number of runs that you've done on it, and they work in milestones of increments of kind of 10 for juniors, and then you get up to 50, 100, 250, 500 plus sort of thing. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think previously there used to be milestones for volunteers as well, but they were kind of capped a little bit. So they were sort of 20. They sort of some of the volunteering milestones counted, but your T-shirt sort of capped at 20. And in recent years, or certainly I've seen these T-shirts now, where those milestones run basically in parallel in the same way to the running ones. But I think what is interesting is, from a volunteering perspective and from a community building aspect, is like, I think it seems what's happened there to me is like you've taken something which traditionally could be seen as quite sort of exclusive, almost from the sort of athletics or sport world or whatever, where you get your club colors, or you get those things, and you've applied them to a much bigger community and in quite sort of innovative ways, so that instead of those things feeling sort of exclusive, they're now more inclusive in terms of people identifying together as part of something. And it doesn't really matter whether your T-shirt says 10 or 50 or nothing. You're all part of that community, and I just think it's really cool. Beyond that as well, it's just really, really useful when you're trying to find a park run on a Saturday morning that you've never been to before, and you're not really sure where the car park is, and you can see people trotting over there in their park run T-shirts. It's like it helps you hone in on the exact location of where you're heading for, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, people are proud. Like it's great to see people wearing the T-shirts, and we've got other merchandise that you can get. But you're right, it's all of this together. It's again bringing that community together, which is really important. We just see everything as one, and that's important for volunteering. It has to be front and center and part of what Parkrun is.
Could I build on some of this idea about milestones and things, but it'll take us in a slightly different direction? I don't know if connected to this part of Parkrun you are, but one of the things that to me has always seems to set Parkrun out as a kind of modern volunteer involving organization is its ability to capture and use data. So it seems to me like you're an organization that's been set up from basically the very early days to get loads of really rich data, like you were created in the digital world, like when most people had computers and the internet. I've been involved in various charities over the years that they weren't created in a digital age when people didn't have computers or the internet, and therefore some of the things at the sort of heart of their involvement or volunteering programs are not rooted in a digital or database structure. But Parkrun seems to be that is like baked in to the model, and that must give you so much kind of rich insight and enable you to work in a particular way, particularly with respect to not just the running metrics, because like that's its own thing, right? But the participation metrics more generally. Like, how likely are you to volunteer and run? How often does that happen? What are the correlations between that? I don't know, but you're just really interested if you have any insight on that as an organization, really, with this rich data and what power that gives you or not.
Yeah, so you're right. And Paul, who again founded Parkrun right from the start, I think he created a system that enabled us to capture some really interesting and useful information. And we're really lucky and able to kind of deep dive in and pull out really useful information. And I've mentioned surveys that we've been able to do, and particularly on the volunteering, we do volunteer experience survey twice a year. That goes out. We do volunteer barriers survey, plus all other surveys that we do and insight. And it enables us and guides us with what we do. So everything that we do, and particularly on the volunteering side, is underpinned by this research and insight. We feel really lucky to be able to use that and be able to apply it to what we do as an organisation.
Something you said right early on in our conversation, but it's sort of been sticking in my brain while we've been chatting, which was that issue of making sure that volunteering doesn't feel like an obligation. You don't feel like if you do so many park runs, you have to volunteer. Obviously, you want people to, but you don't want people to feel obliged. I wonder how you go about communicating using language that doesn't make it feel like an obligation. Sometimes when you ask somebody to volunteer, even the word volunteering can feel like it's something that about giving back and so on. I wonder how we can shift language in volunteering such that it sort of portrays that more of a sense of being involved, an affinity, getting the benefits of volunteering. What language changes should we be using to kind of articulate that message?
It's got to be a carrot, doesn't it? And not a stick. I think that's really important with volunteering and the language. And for us as an organisation, our position on this is we want, and it doesn't matter actually whether it's volunteering, walking or running, we want you to be here because you want to be here. We don't want anybody to, you to feel that you have to be there. I mean, of course, if you feel like you want to contribute to the community, then that's okay because you've decided that yourself. But we're not going to force you to do that. And I think that's really important because if you do start to use that language that makes people feel obliged and feel obligated, then they're not doing it for the reasons that are going to really keep them there. Like that, they're always going to be feeling, and that you do something in life where somebody's forced you to do it. Like you're going there, you're not really kind of looking forward to it. It's never going to stick. We want people to be there and doing it because they want to. So it's all about inviting people, using positive language that it sounds appealing. As you said earlier, Chris, talking about the benefits of getting involved. Come along and Parkrun. You're going to meet new people. Are you looking to learn some new skills? Well, look, we can offer you this, and also about being really clear about what it involves. So, we let people know it's low commitment. You can jump in on the day. If you do it once, that's great. If you want to come back every week, that's great. If you want to come back once a month, that flexibility with it. And it's not just about the language, I think, with this. It's also about how else we talk about volunteering. We share stories and real life examples of people volunteering, like people like you in the community, and this is what their experience has been, to really humanize it, and for people to see, smiley faces, and that's really important. These kind of that imagery around it can really determine whether people kind of have a look and go, yeah, that looks like something I could do, or kind of turn the page and move on to something different. But yeah, I think it's really important, like throughout the language with Parkrun, we're not going to shame, we're not going to pull people out if you haven't got involved in a certain way. Like, it's all about you choosing to be involved on your terms. And, if you like to come and volunteer, great. Because if you do, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it and love it and come back again.
Carol, it feels like what you've just described to me there, particularly that aspect of kind of, which I know is part of Parkrun, right? This idea, this kind of no commitment approach, and this kind of turn up and volunteer approach. Isn't that normal? It's not that normal in the sector. And the model you're operating in terms of like a very sort of lean approach to staffing and a high sort of dependence on volunteers is also not completely unusual, but it's also particularly at the scale and at the profile that Parkrun has is also quite special. I'm interested like how it feels as someone on the inside of that who's been part of that for, a long time here. How does that feel? Quite brave? Does that feel quite bold in terms of moves? It feels like, you're an organization that's placing a huge amount of trust in volunteers to manage and mobilize and coordinate, and devolving a lot of power and responsibility to them. Does that sit comfortably? You're enabling people to turn up without training in this, you're making kind of, you've made choices to say, actually, what's really important is people can just turn up. I've been involved in organizations over the years where it's like, actually, what we've often found ourselves trying to do is kind of manage and minimize risk as much as we can. Everyone must do training, or you can't start before you've done safeguarding training, for example, or before you've done certain vetting processes or certain checks. And it feels to me like that is just not possible. And like, you couldn't have Parkrun with that model. But equally, it seems to me like, therefore, to have that model, you've had to be really brave and had to be really bold around that. And I just wondered, does it feel like that?
Let me emphasize that we've got, obviously, processes in place to kind of look at risk and make sure it's safe. So all of that is there, and that's really, really important for us. But with the volunteering, we've made sure that alongside that, we can still have roles that are simple and easy and straightforward, that fit within that model. And we've basically had that since the start, and it's a really good scalable model that we can build on. There's a lot of experience, a lot of these events that gets handed down as events grow, and enables communities to operate. So I think, in terms of your question about how do I see this and the future and growth, like we are growing as an organization from a kind of central function. Although we are quite lean, we do need more people, I think, to be more involved in that, to help the growth. We do need to look at the structure and make sure that we are supporting volunteers and ambassadors to make sure that they in turn can support our events. Can't kind of dismiss that we are going to have to consider where we need to make investments, and that's part of our global strategy. So our global strategy right now is that we want to be world-class organization, and we want to ensure that we have more global reach and impact. And to do that, we're going to need to invest and make sure we've got the support from a head office perspective. So I can definitely already see that we've definitely grown over the last couple of years. But then at that event level, I don't know. I think that's something we want to protect though as well. I have to say that is a real benefit for us as an organisation. It works. We know it's what people want and are attracted to. I think it's something, as I said, we need to make sure that we don't overcomplicate it. And I guess it's just worked, Matt, over the years with this. We're always kind of monitoring it. I could understand though for other organisations, it's not always as simple. Hey, we've got the structure set up so that there's so many people around and everyone feels supported. So yeah, I can understand other organisations you might need more training and more input and support.
Like, it feels like you've just really got the balance right around proportionality on this. And like you said, right, things are safe, things are managed effectively, we're proportionate, but we want to protect the things we need to protect about the experience. And I wonder if some of that also is about the coming together of all the things that you've got as a modern digital database, research and insight-based organization, which is like you can be really confident about that and your position on that because you've got all the data and you're making informed decisions about that. And I think perhaps sometimes when organizations are making decisions about risk, sometimes we're making it on a hunch, sometimes we're making those decisions based on our emotions and our hearts, not just with our heads and the data. And I think it feels to me like Parkrun's got all that data, and that is intrinsic to how you operate and how you make decisions, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, I've said a couple of times on here that insight and research underpins so much of what we do and so many of the decisions that we make. It's not like we kind of go like this, we'll do this today. Like we go back and we say, okay, this is what we're seeing, this is the evidence here. And every kind of operational decision we make, any volunteering changes that we make or whatever, that is all based on kind of the evidence that we've got and the insight and what we're hearing. And that's really important. And that's why, I guess, to your point, Matt, is that's why we're confident in that model, because the evidence we have is that it is working. And, we look at incidents coming through. And if there was something that was not quite right here, then we'll go and investigate that. And if we need to make a little change here. But yeah, we've been really lucky over the years that we've had this information that we've been able to support the structure that we've got, and it allows us to scale. That this model works in UK, it works in Japan, it works in the US. And we're expanding into other territories, which is
and long may it continue, for sure. So Carol, we like on this podcast, well, in fact, the whole purpose of the podcast really is to try and help share innovation from one organisation to another across the sector, and you've shared a lot with us. You've already got the best job title I think we've had on the organisation, Global Leader Volunteering, in my view. But I wonder if we were to give you a new job title of Global Leader Volunteering for all things volunteering across all sectors, and gave you that responsibility, what would you bring from Parkrun to other volunteering organisations and really try to promote to move the sort of professional volunteering forward?
That's a really good question. I think for me with volunteering, it really is that kind of understanding and the kind of positioning of what volunteering is. I still hear in so many different areas kind of negative connotations around volunteering. That's something that we're working really hard with at Parkrun. I'd mentioned it before about that position and about the benefits of volunteering. I think there's so much that can be done in that, and encourage more people. Social prescribing, those kind of areas, I think are just like a huge opportunity that we can get more people involved. But just really challenging the benefits that volunteering can have for society in so many places. Get more kids involved in it. Can help them in so many ways. Get more young people like skilled up in certain areas. Volunteering can help with this. There's so many areas. So yeah, just that realization about what volunteer. And I know, Chris, you mentioned about the word volunteer, and I've always kind of thought, would is the word volunteering, do we need to kind of think about something else? But I kind of always think this is an opportunity as well to kind of, again, challenge that perception in a lot of areas about what volunteering entails, and reword it, write the story of volunteering in a really positive and attractive way for people, because it can offer it offers so much to society and communities. And yeah, and I just see, like on the news, how much division there is in kind of the world at the moment. Things like volunteering, these are things that can bring people together. It is that leveler that I spoke about earlier, that, I'd love to see utilise more to bring people together. That's what I'd love to see. though. The other thing as well is probably more collaboration as well across, different organisations, and this is why these things are good. These podcasts and sharing of ideas, and just helping each other with this, because it's such a wonderful opportunity for people to get involved with. It'd be great with other organisations to share ideas and work together, those kind of things.
Carol, like there's lots of obviously lots of exciting stuff that's going on and been going on at Parkrun. I'd be really interested to know, sort of from a volunteering perspective, what's next? What's on your to-do list? What are you getting excited about?
So I think I briefly mentioned, like last year we published Parkrun's first ever global strategy. And that was the whole organisation. And within that was a recognition that volunteering is really important. We already knew that. So kind of what came out of that then was a global volunteering strategy. This is our first ever one. So that was released earlier this year in May. So this is kind of over the next 5 years, and it's really exciting for us because we're going to see quite a lot of growth. We're going to be moving to new territories, and this strategy is going to enable us to kind of reach more people and get more people particularly involved in volunteering. So we're doing some work on actually talking about role profiles. So we're looking at some of our roles and seeing, can we define those more, perhaps create new roles. And there's also a digital aspect, so we're always looking at ways that we can make things simpler for volunteers on the ground. So I don't know whether you guys have you ever done the timekeeping at Parkrun in the past? Yeah, Chris is nodding. So in the past we had the stopwatches. I don't know if you remember that. And then, we've brought in having an app base. So those kind of innovation, that's what we're looking for, kind of behind the scenes when people our volunteers are doing the results. We've brought in a new system to do that. So those kind of things we're looking at. But also I think, I've mentioned it a few times as well, protecting what we do well as well. And that's really important. And just ensuring that as we do grow, we don't lose what is so special and what people love about Parkrun and volunteering, which is that getting together on a Saturday morning, simple, easy, and then also the ambassador roles that support that, and the ED roles.
I should say, actually, timekeeping is my favourite volunteering role at Parkrun. I absolutely love it. Yeah,
I love it as well.
You can chat to people at the end. That's why I like it, because I'm quite noisy and I get to hear how everybody's run was. Anyway, we digress. But yes,
the pressure of timekeeping feels a bit too much for me. Like,
yeah,
makes me
nervous.
I
like it, and I like scanning the tokens at the end. That's my other favourite one.
Because you get to see everybody's names. So when you do the scan, I love it. I'm with you, Chris. Timing's my favourite, and then scanning, because you get to see, how was your day today? Hey, Chris. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Anyway, Carol, you've been so generous with your time, and I want to say thank you for the time today, but also thank you to you and your colleagues for putting together such a brilliant organisation that really brings local communities together, gets people out on a Saturday morning, gets people active, gets people volunteering, but also helps us rethink volunteering. I mean, Matt and I talk about Parkrun all the time, but I think you have really reinvented volunteering in lots of ways for other organisations. So thank you for your contribution to volunteering in that way. And there's so many things we could have talked about. I mean, I'd love to actually have talked about family volunteering, because I think it's really nice how it's one of the few organisations where I see whole families come together and volunteer as a group, or maybe run as a group. But thank you for getting involved. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And
thank
it's been wonderful.
You've been terrific. Thank you so much for your generosity, and thank you for your support. And I might see you at Parkrun, hey?
Yeah, well, you'll see us both there. Matt less than me, but not because he goes less often, but because he runs too fast. So he's only there for 15 minutes. He's home having a cup of coffee.
Do 15 minutes, and then you can come and scan at the end.
So, well, Matt, that didn't disappoint, did it? What a great conversation, and what a fantastic offering that Parkrun offer, but also what a drive and energy and thoughtfulness that Carol brings to the function.
Yeah, I will confess, as a sort of big fan of Parkrun, this is definitely one I've been looking forward to. Just sort of hearing about how things work on the inside of an organization that I'm really passionate about. I'm also just really inspired by in a sort of professional context, and yeah, as you say, it didn't disappoint for me either. One of my big takeaways from today, and I think this is one of those things that if you know Parkrun, it's obvious, but it's very interesting to hear articulated today, is how Parkrun has this kind of mindset about volunteering and the benefit of volunteering, and that being, volunteering at Parkrun is not just an enabler to deliver the product of running. It is part of the product. It is part of the experience, and something that you kind of need to try, I guess, to get the full Parkrun experience. I think is really, really brilliant. Like, why can't more of us think about that? I think that's great. That's something I'll be definitely taking with me. What's your reflections on that, Chris?
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I think she sort of talked about it not being an obligation, not being a chore, but actually volunteering being part of the package, part of the experience, and I think that it certainly rings true for me as a park runner and a park run volunteer as well. Um, I also like the conversations about language. I don't think she said this, but what I kind of think she was describing to us is that it's important to get if you don't get the language right, but it's also about getting the story right. And I think Parkrun have been really good at really articulating what it is to be a volunteer, what it means to be involved and feel belonging and affinity and membership almost of Parkrun, whether that's as a volunteer or as a runner. It's all part of sort of embodied and mixed up in one big melting pot together. And I think they've generally got that right. And I'd be interested to see how that plays out in the future. And then I suppose the other big thing that comes through loud and clear is this issue of data, which of course we explore with a lot of our guests, but Parkrun do seem to be ahead of many in terms of the ability to capture data, the ability to build data collection into their sort of DNA as an organization. It's not an afterthought. It is absolutely there, central to what they do as an organization, and obviously then able to leverage that data and use it for influence or to redesign and re-energize their volunteering offer. And I thought that was a sign of a really mature and well thought through organisation that I think many volunteer professionals would love to have the technology and the ability and the organisational design to back that up in their own organisations.
I think that data piece is interesting as well for me. Like, it doesn't, it gives them confidence as well to take particular approaches or to not go down particular tracks. Or I think if lots of organizations were created in, the modern, in the 21st century, and that's when they started,
Mm.
I imagine more of us would have really sophisticated data at the heart of our structures. And I think it just shows how powerful that is if you can capture it consistently and leverage it consistently, because it seems to me that it can bring so many benefits. And I think we didn't even get onto this, right? But like that data, it also kind of gamifies or incentivizes the volunteering as well to collect your next milestone, or to, to look at the amount of roles you've done, or to collect all the roles at Parkrun or whatever. Like, all of that stuff is just so powerful in so many ways. And yeah, it makes me excited, but also kind of jealous sometimes about what they have at their fingertips there and what we could all do with more data and more insight.
Yeah. Well, most of our listeners will have volunteer programs which are older than Parkrun's whole organisation, and it's much harder to bolt data solutions and technology onto existing models than it is to create them from scratch. But I think sometimes that might be the challenge, that we really need to go back to the drawing board. But yeah, it takes investment, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, that you need the data before you can get the investment.
Yeah, of course.
It's really, really difficult.
As we've heard on some of our other podcasts too, right?
Yeah. So, wow, another one done. And I think we've kept up the standards, some really great guests on the shows. So I'm hoping the people will continue to listen, of course, and to subscribe and follow on the various channels. There are plenty of other good speakers already lined up, some already recorded for you to listen to. Do get in touch. We always love to have feedback. You can do that through the show notes or via our website, www.timeforimpact.co.uk. Until next time, thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Hello, Chris Wade again here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and past episodes of the Time for Impact podcast. This is just a little gentle reminder that if you ever want help redesigning your volunteering strategy, rethinking how your strategy is going to serve your organization's needs longer term, if you want to examine or demonstrate the impact your volunteering has on your organization and your local community, or you want to just widen participation within your organization, these are some of the many ways where Time for Impact can help you take your volunteering experiences to the next level. Please do reach out. We'd be really keen to help. Our website, as you already know, is www.timeforimpact.co.uk.